Northfield has seen a lot of change at the site of the Archer House, and its owners have been working on plans for the site ever since the building suffered a devastating fire in 2020. As the private developers move forward with plans, they will have to navigate several approval processes the City of Northfield has in place to assure ordinance compliance, financing considerations, and appropriateness for the historic downtown.
I'm Nate Carlson. I work in the Community Development Department of the City of Northfield. Responsibilities for our department include assisting private developers through the permitting and approval safeguards our community has put in place. We are also tasked with preserving the historic character of our town while also ensuring that new development meets the needs of a 21st century town. All of this while maintaining the economic well-being of the city to provide stability for residents, businesses, and the overall tax base. It's a lot to keep track of, which is why we work with passionate community members who volunteer their time to serve on the boards and commissions that review projects. Each board has different elements of the proposal they look at, and their scope of considerations are very specific to ensure fairness and consistency. Today, I will explain each step that the owners of the Archer site will make before getting final approval and beginning construction on their project. I will also highlight when there will be opportunities for the general public who don't volunteer for boards and commissions to make official public comment and ask questions. Again, there will be different meetings for different aspects of the project, so comments will need to be within the scope of whatever is being considered in any given meeting. Don't worry, it all makes sense when we get started.
The Heritage Preservation Commission is a group of community volunteers that review projects in the historic district in downtown Northfield. The HPC seeks to safeguard the heritage of Northfield by preserving sites and structures that enhance the community's appeal to residents, visitors, and businesses. They help developers and owners who wish to improve and otherwise alter historic buildings. It also reviews new construction surrounding historic sites for complementary designs.
The developers of the Archer site have been meeting with the HPC regularly to discuss plans and receive feedback for their last 3 years. Their next meeting on the 12th continues the discussion. There won't be a vote that night, but they will review the application, ask questions of the applicant, and provide feedback before a final vote at a future meeting.
The Heritage Preservation Commission's scope is limited to design reviews. They do not dictate usage, interior design, funding, nor safety compliance, which are handled elsewhere. Their sole concern is the exterior of buildings in the historic district. Their standards for historic appropriateness are based on state and federal law, in addition to local HPC precedents and policies. The HPC does not design the buildings for private developers, but they do offer specific comments on which standards an application may not meet and other specific suggestions for how to meet the desired standards. The public may comment and ask questions at any HPC meeting. The public can provide official comment in several ways: speaking in person at an HPC meeting, using the online e-comment feature, call or send a letter to city staff specifying that the communication is for public comment. In addition to public comment, you can contact the members of the HPC via email through the city's website. The Zoning Board of Appeals is made up of community volunteers who conduct public hearings and make the final decision on projects requesting a variance or appeals of other land use decisions. To participate in a Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, members of the public can make comments in several ways: in person, online through the e-comment system, call or send a letter to city staff specifying that the communication is for public comment. In addition to public comment, you can contact the members of the board via email through the city's website. Residents can attend the meeting on October 19th, in person, by live streaming it, or watching a recording after the fact.
The City of Northfield has a century of decisions, policies, and best practices that inform our standards. We have ordinances and zone requirements that are the agreed upon best standards for most of the buildings they regulate. But once in a while, a private developer has a plan that doesn't fit the existing rules. So before they begin construction, they can apply for a zoning variance. Basically, they're getting permission to do the things a little differently because of several factors that may not allow them to physically construct a building or some other hardship. It's up to the Zoning Board of Appeals to review the applications for a variance and make the final decision.
The owners of the Archer site have submitted 2 variance applications. The first variance is for the height of the building. In the historic district, the maximum height is 50 feet. The height of the building is measured as the vertical distance from the natural grade of the site to an imaginary plane located 50 feet above the natural grade.
The special circumstances for the Archer site include the slope toward the Cannon River, which throws off the height measurement for the proposed building. The natural grade on the front of the building is higher than the natural grade on the back of the building. So the first variance application is to account for this naturally occurring discrepancy, which would currently measure the height of the building from the lower grade at just over 57 feet. The variance would make this permissible because of the special circumstances of the slope toward the river.
The second variance is for the front setback of the building. A setback is the required distance that a building needs to be from the property line. In the historic district, there is a 0-foot setback, so the code requires buildings to be flush with the property line facing Division Street, right up against the sidewalk.
This variance request is to deviate from the setback requirement to allow part of the 4-story to be further back from the property line. The first 3 stories would still be flush to the sidewalk, but the 4th would be further back with the current designs. The decision on whether or not to allow these variances will be up to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
No, it's not Groundhog's Day. There are several items that will be discussed at the October 19th meeting, each with their own limited scope and consideration. Like Zoning Board of Appeals meetings, the public can make comments and ask questions at any Planning Commission meeting.
The Planning Commission is made up of the same community volunteers as the Zoning Board of Appeals. They just have different functions. The Zoning Board of Appeals deals mostly with variance requests, which are appeals for special circumstances not compliant with the current zoning. The Planning Commission also deals with zoning, but only business as usual zoning, like a conditional use permit.
The conditional use permit is an application that goes through the Planning Commission and City Council for more run-of-the-mill projects. Not that out of the ordinary, but there are certain aspects that require further review to set conditions for them being allowed. In this case, the conditional use permit is needed because of land use, not construction.
The Archer project needs a conditional use permit because it includes off-street parking and is in the historic district. In order for off-street parking to be approved, it needs to be reviewed and meet the conditions of conditional use permit set by the Planning Commission and City Council based on the comprehensive plan. If approved, the CUP would then go to the Council for a final vote at the November 7th meeting.
In the state of Minnesota, developers can apply for tax increment financing. Tax increment financing, referred to as TIF, is a tool established in Minnesota law that allows local governments to help decrease the tax burden on local businesses caused by economic development. TIF offsets increases in local property taxes caused by development in order to incentivize quality development in designated zoning areas. Using TIF has been shown to increase the taxable market value of the impacted properties. TIF does not impact how applicants pay their taxes. It simply uses the original market value of the property when calculating taxes due. TIF applicants still pay taxes based on the pre-development property value. TIF does not capture state-imposed property taxes. It only applies to city taxes. Since TIF is a complex and strategic tool for cities, there are many review processes involved to ensure community oversight. The first step for community review for tax increment financing is with the Planning Commission.
Applicants for tax increment financing must have approval from the volunteers on the Planning Commission in order to move forward. The Planning Commission's sole responsibility in the process is to confirm that the type of project being considered conforms to the city's land use plans. Basically, their job is to make sure that the proposed uses, intensity, and density of the project align with the policy goals of the comprehensive plan, which is a document that guides long-term goals for the city. This is what we mean when we say some boards have a very particular scope to their considerations. If the Planning Commission agrees that the application aligns with the comprehensive plan, the proposal moves on to the next step. The process for approving TIF is laid out very specifically in Minnesota state law, but Northfield added its own additional step to ensure that TIF is being used appropriately. Northfield decided that any TIF application that is including housing must be approved by the Housing and Redevelopment Authority, and that any TIF applications that are mixed and may include housing, that must be approved by the Economic Development Authority. In this case, since it has the mix of housing and commercial uses, the Archer project will be reviewed by the Economic Development Authority. They will review the owner's TIF application to determine whether it is an appropriate and good investment by the city. The EDA, which is made up of community volunteers, will make their recommendation on whether or not to approve TIF to the City Council, which won't be until November.
The Heritage Preservation Commission is responsible for issuing a certificate of appropriateness for projects under their review. Because the Archer site is located within Northfield's local historic district, a certificate of appropriateness is required for new construction. This is the formal term used for a historic approval permit to ensure the building is compatible based on professional, established standards for historic places. Until the certificate of appropriateness is granted, a building permit cannot be issued, and therefore new construction on the site cannot occur.
The owners of the Archer site are pursuing a certificate of appropriateness, which includes their design plans for the building. Before the HPC meeting, staff has already reviewed the plan to ensure that it is complete and compliant with code and safety standards. At the November 1st meeting, HPC will have to take action on the Archer Certificate of Appropriateness, and they must either recommend to approve, recommend to deny, or vote to table the discussion and resolve it at a future meeting. The HPC has the final decision on the COA, but if denied, the applicant can appeal to the City Council. It is important to note that the Council's decision does not necessarily have to align with the HPC's decision. Once again, the public can comment and ask questions at any HPC meeting, including this one. This will be a long night. All the information from the applicant, every board or commission included thus far, and expert city staff will present thorough information to the City Council and the public on the appropriateness of the TIF application and any other Archer site items from boards and commissions ready for council action. This is a public hearing, so this is an opportunity for community members to add input to the discussion.
To be absolutely clear, each item must be considered on its own merit. The TIF consideration must stand on its own merit, just like the certificate of appropriateness, the zoning variances, the conditional use permit, and any other item before the council. Just because one item passes does not mean they will all necessarily pass. Each action must make sense on its own merits.
Following the public hearing, the council may take the first step to approve using tax increment financing. The first step is to approve the Planning Commission's recommendation saying that this project is appropriate for TIF. If approved, the council will create a TIF zoning district. And by creating the district, the council does not necessarily approve the financial assistance. It merely would be agreeing that this site would be appropriate for TIF use if such an application were deemed appropriate.
The community will then have 2 weeks to review the application, which will have been public since the Economic Development Authority meeting. We hope you use this time to discuss the project with neighbors, reach out to city staff with questions, and contact your council members to provide input. They will want to hear from you before the next step in the process.
This is the final step in the TIF approval process. Based on the feedback and considerations from the Economic Development Authority and the City Council, city staff works with the private owners to draft an agreement for tax increment financing that will be presented to the City Council, and this agreement expresses the firm expectations of the city and how compliance by the developers will be measured. At this council meeting, the City Council may approve the drafted agreement for tax increment financing by a majority vote. If there are any lingering votes that need to take place for this project, it will also happen on November 21st.
We want the public to be involved. This is a big project with many considerations. The sooner you make your voice heard in an official setting, the more impact you can have on the course of the project. We encourage you to attend these meetings, ask questions, provide input, and contact your elected officials to make your voice heard. Thank you for being an active community member and for keeping Northfield's civic heritage alive and strong.